next speaker is from NG Life Sciences. NG Life Sciences is a front runner in developing innovative solutions that allow medical device, pharmaceutical, and biotechnology manufacturers to efficiently bring compliant and high-quality products to market. Our presenter is the CEO. It has an extensive 28-year career. Began in the U.S. Air Force, working as a medical lab technologist and transitioned into specialized areas including medical device research, product development, digital health, and technology. He is an industry advocate and actively participates in groups and initiatives building councils. Please welcome with a warm round of applause the CEO of NG Life Sciences, Dr. Gregory Price.
Yeah, they got the right. Yes. So it sounds like this is the last session right before happy hour, right? So hopefully everyone's awake. I was thinking about we could do some jumping jacks to get started, but that's okay. Yeah. So really this topic today is really about turning operational intent into reality. Obviously we're in a very complex industry. Let me figure out the controls here. So obviously we have a lot of complexity. We tend to have efficiency that creeps into our processes, especially over time. Obviously we get audits, assessments, and we like plug holes here and there, and then we drive some efficiency at the same time, right? But obviously it becomes costly over time also, but we really want to start driving, to make it more simple to manage the complexity, scalability of the products, and the processes, right, based on the products. Because now we have, obviously, the pharmaceuticals, medical device, we have artificial intelligence in the pipeline that's starting to come about. So we have all these additional complexities that are driving combo products. I don't know if any of y'all get into combo products. I'm saying very complex, conscious sedation type products that are driven by software to drive the drug delivery to a patient. So there's some interesting things going on in the marketplace. So we're evolving all the time. Regulations is changing constantly. So really we need to have a methodical, continuous improvement base. Root causes a lot of times are misunderstood because this is really about driving efficiency, but also driving quality and delivering, more efficiently to our customers and patient safety. Do we have the right key process indicators, et cetera? So from a life science industry, obviously I've been working in the medical device, pharmaceutical, biotech industry for quite some time. But I wanted to go through an illustration that might apply, because I know a lot of y'all have been talking about CMOs also, and how do you manage that, what's the quality aspects, the regulatory piece. But there's some complexities, but I use the medical device example because it just shows some complexity that will resonate when we're outsourcing all these components and parts into a final assembly process. So this is a case study of a particular manufacturer that's developing a complex medical device. It probably had 30 to 40,000 parts to it, very complex. Parts coming from China, parts coming from Israel, all over the world basically. So it's pretty complex, and managing that supply chain can be very complicated, right? And pharma with your raw materials, depending on how you're bringing those raw materials and compounding, and you all manufacture in batches, so if one compound is incorrect, right, you lose the whole batch, right? But really in this scenario, the revenue was a total about $3 billion in sales around the complex medical device. Obviously, poor quality manifests itself in that global supply chain. So when you had all those parts coming in the final assembly, getting it right the first time, it was 0% yield. So there was always rework involved in building the final assembly. So these are some characteristics that were coming out right in this scenario. There's approximately 3,000 nonconformances generated a month. Just think about managing those nonconformances and doing the investigations and making those corrections on a monthly basis. And then there was an increased number of complaints. You started seeing trends of increased number of complaints in the field, increased number of CAPAs, approximately 100 million in non-conforming material. It was interesting, in this particular case, I was presenting this to someone else, and they thought I was talking about them, but I wasn't. So I know this is a problem in the industry in general of managing these complex supply chains that are occurring. And then obviously loss of production time, because we're spending all our time fighting issues, fires, trying to resolve all the issues and addressing the nonconformances. So we went in and did some more analysis, and we started seeing, increased costs around failure analysis. Recalls were starting to happen, field actions, complaints, nonconformances, CAPAs, return of material right back to the warehouse. So you have a whole warehouse of $100 million of bad material sitting there. And then also the increased number of complaints, installation, warranty, service calls. So all these data points started relating, and then you could see similar failure modes occurring across all of those phases, right? Post, pre, and through the manufacturing process. So when doing more failure analysis and detailed root cause analysis, we saw that the supplier controls was one of the things that wasn't effective. Obviously, we had bad parts coming in, repeated failures coming from our contract manufacturers that are building those parts and components. How do you manage that, ensure that the quality is being produced that you expect when you're outsourcing manufacturing those various components? How do I pick the right supplier? I think there's one presentation, Supply by Design. Has any of y'all attended that one? Or maybe that's later. That's one industry initiative that was being done by Dr. Phillips Xavier and an industry representation of looking at good best practices around supplier quality around the design. And then obviously parts coming from suppliers, frequent repeated failures, change control, the transfer into the supply chain. So when we made product design changes, or if you made material changes, right, transferring that into the supply chain was problematic. And what was happening, material was coming in that was out of spec because it hadn't caught up with the new design specs. And then of course, if you look at the total cost of quality, the basic principles of Six Sigma, based on what the trends are, where we find if we're operating at a very low sigma, it usually costs us 25 to 40% of our revenue. In this case, would allude to that because our yield's 0%, right? So it's probably even greater than that total cost of quality to correct that and actually deliver that to market. Our cost was enormous, right? But if we started working and investing on those root causes, we could have streamlined that, and then the managers are not fighting fires every day trying to address issues, right, to be able to build product. So in this particular case, it was estimated around, you could get potentially 750 to 1.2 billion if you started working on some of those root causes for the correction. And really the question here is would you invest that potential savings to actually drive down the cost of quality? I think most people would if they understand what the root causes are. So we're talking to a lot of executives across the industry and merger acquisitions that occur. We're buying other companies. We have new processes. The visibility is always a challenge of understanding the visibility across our processes and how effective they are. And a lot of them are talking like, I don't really understand what's going on. I don't have the adequate visibility to make decisions or take action quick enough before it's too late to address a non-routine quality event. So this is where NG Life Sciences is trying to come up with new approaches, new ways to tackle some of these challenges that we all have experienced, right? And I've seen it multiple times, so it's not like only seen it in one spot. And this is where we are trying to look at, there's three characteristics, right? Maturity, visibility, and efficiency that we're focusing on from a strategic perspective. Maturing our processes, driving more effectiveness in our processes that do result in compliance, but also drive quality as a number one priority. And exceeding customer expectations and outcomes. When you look at an organization, right, you have product development, you have manufacturing, you have supplier quality management, you have your quality systems, you have IT, information technology. how does all those integrate with each other to work together instead of working in silos? I don't know how many of you have experienced of silos within your or own organizations. So how do we turn this operational intent into reality? Because we all want to produce high quality products. We want to be efficient. We want to deliver that effectively across the board. So talk a little bit more about the MEV grid. These are strategic points that you can focus on. What's the maturity of the processes, the visibility? Do I have the right KPIs? Sorry, some of the text is pretty small. Increase speed of the processes, right? Faster, leaner compliance. And then the visibility, do we have the appropriate visibility to understand when we have predictive indicators, or do we have the data points that we can start understanding when maybe a non-routine quality event might be on the rise? I know there's been some work done on working on higher level metrics to start measuring that, and with some industry initiatives that have occurred last couple of years. Looking how you can monitor that, what are some of those KPIs where you can go search, like heat maps, starting to understand risk profiles of your product portfolios, and looking at post-market data like complaints, non-conformances, production data, and putting that together to understand, do I have a trend happening that could potentially rise, that would cause an issue? Efficiency also is about our processes, right? How clear, how complete are they? Efficiency, a lot of times in quality systems, I see high-level procedures, but our staff interprets them like 20 different ways. Can we get a little more precision, right, to make it a very repeatable process that can be executed, and then feedback loops to continuously improve that process? But really, if you start looking at maturity, visibility, efficiency, there's another attribute with talking to a lot of executives too, is agility. With a lot of the executives, you understand that the external conditions we can't always change, but we have to have more agility within our organization, so that way we can actually adapt to those changes, like the regulatory environment changing or the market conditions are changing. I know there's been a lot more competitive nature in the market too, right, in pricing, right, to compete with competitors. But really, reducing the time to commercialization, product quality, patient satisfaction, adding shareholder value, and then also increasing profitability. So the next level down is really starting to look at the organization, the performance management aspects, and quality performance across the organization. And this is where you can start to identify where is those opportunities that I could actually get a return on investment. Looking at the people, the processes, the performance management in the organization. I'm sure all of you are aware that working in organizations, we get set in our ways, right? We're human, we don't want to change. And you get resistance when you do try to inject change, so it's like moving a mountain sometimes. But it can be very challenging, right, to navigate those waters. But we constantly have to change, right, to stay up with the market. So really looking at the people to actually go through a particular scenario with the people aspect in studies analysis that we usually do in assessments is we'll look at, what is the day in life of a manager? What is his perception of what his activities are a day, and then what is really happening, and starting to look at that. Are they spending more of their time fighting fires? And if they are, why is that, right? So you start asking some why questions, right, to get to the root cause of some of those things. Also the processes, how efficient are they? Do we have technology? Have we assimilated technology into those processes? Do we have good, robust processes to apply technology to make those more efficient? And I know if you're in the pharma, you probably have a lot of automation, a lot of technology you're using to automate some of those processes. But this is where you're looking at to identify and really to start focusing on what can I do in a 1 year's time frame, right, that I could actually get a return on investment so it pays for itself within that first year. And then it becomes annualized once you sustain that behavior. Another challenge is, when you're shifting behaviors and culture, What we found is starting with certain processes and working on those process areas to help start changing and modifying that behavior. And then over time, you'll build up a larger scale transformation for your organization. You know, and really the question here, you know, are there hidden dollars? You know, is there hidden opportunities within your own organizations that would help drive some opportunities, right, to get that improvement and to start really spiraling a continuous improvement so that way you become more agile and more adaptable to the market conditions. You know, faster, leaner compliance, like even deploying technology. Why as an industry we're so slow to adopt technology? Well, I hear all the time, right? I don't want to validate the software system. You know, it's a regulatory requirement. We have to do it, right, for its intended use. So what are some of those challenges? When looking at complex supply chains, you know, related to contract manufacturing, you know, do we have the right supplier quality controls in place to monitor and manage those things so we don't have an adverse event? Because if it's under our label or with a manufacturer of record, right, with a regulatory agency, they're going to hold us accountable for those things, right? So, which if you have a non-routine quality event, all of us knows that can get very expensive very quickly. So is it worth making some investments to make sure you're managing that and have the visibility, the right KPIs coming back from your contract manufacturers? That's really all I had for today. Did anyone have any particular questions, or I'd be interested to hear any particular challenges that anyone may be experiencing too?
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Laura Robinson with Alder Biopharmaceuticals. I'm wondering what advice you would give for a company that's on the low maturity level, brand new, in terms of if we really could design an organization from the start. What are the 2 or 3 things you would say would be essential if, and I know not everybody has that opportunity in this room, but we're not in improvement mode, we're in design mode.
So you're building a new organization from the ground up. Is it the manufacturing side of it, or you're building new products too?
Yeah, it's organizationally, okay, sorry. 100% external manufacturing, right, relying on CMOs. So how do we build an organization to manage that particular strategy?
Okay, so you're going to be like a virtual outsourcing all the CMOs for your manufacturing. Well, obviously, is the key of managing that, right? You're going to need some robust supplier quality controls, right? How do you select the right suppliers? Are they, and then what is the suppliers they're going to have to bring in the particular materials to build your compound or whatever drug that you're manufacturing in that case. So supplier quality is going to be very significant in managing that, and then establishing those KPIs to feedback into your organization so you have visibility in that, and then risk profile your suppliers too, right? And good practices, it's to understand their performance too, right? And are we having issues or quality control issues, and have a risk scale, right? That you manage that based on risk too. So to dial into those processes, also when you're assessing them, you know, from a quality system perspective. Thanks. I mean, obviously there's other components, but since you're outsourcing it all, those controls are going to be very significant because you're dependent on that whole supply chain, right? Any other questions? Got a quiet group today. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. I've been hearing a lot about KPIs and key performance indicators to measure the performance of your contract manufacturing organization or whoever you want to contract out. Do you have any key indicators or metrics that you would recommend for companies that's outsourcing their manufacturing, or testing, et cetera, to contract manufacturer or contract labs?
So I wouldn't want to dictate specific ones right now. I would like to understand the product profile, the risk profile to understand, but obviously you have critical to quality characteristics of what you're manufacturing for the client. I mean, not for the client, but your CMO would have key quality characteristics that they need to meet. Those would be some KPI indicators. Do I have nonconformances occurring during the manufacturing process as another area to look at, because I found that nonconformances can be a pre-indicator to events that occur later. And then even in this case that I went over, you would see nonconformances occurring in production, and then you would see similar failure modes occurring in the field. But I know the pharmaceutical is going to be a little different, right? So it's really the quality of the compound that you're producing. So I think each case would have to be analyzed to see what's the best key indicators and to drive the right behavior, right? Because you can't have bad KPIs that drive the wrong behavior too. So you have to be very careful to design those correctly.
Maybe a slightly, Clive Patience from Agios Pharmaceuticals. Maybe a slightly related comment. I really liked your emphasis in one of the slides on looking at the various activities and the environment that exists at the CMO. One of the interesting experiments that we did prior to joining Agios was to take a very frustrated multivariate analysis geek, and who was controlling biological processes in different companies' manufacturing plant, and needed some development. And actually what the gentleman did was to come to basically derive a multivariate model of what was going on with the quality practices and the product and the performance of the plant,
Right.
as a forward-looking indicator of whether we're trending to a point of danger.
Right.
And it was a very, it's basically distilled everything down to a single point of level of control that allowed us to really proactively monitor that.
Yeah, it's very helpful if you can have those inputs. Once you've identified the correct ones, it's going to work with your product line and the risk profile. Because I've worked with heat maps too, where organizations take product portfolios and they feed that data into even post-market manufacturing too, and they start building a risk profile right of their product portfolio. There was some work done with Xavier, the FDA, and another organization on some high-level quality metrics, but we got into some examples around heat maps and examples around that that's published on, it's more the medical device side, but there's some characteristics there that could probably be leveraged from the pharma side too, because there were some pharma people on the team too, right, from an industry initiative. So thank you so much for sharing. Any other questions? I know I'm the only person stopping you from happy hour, right? If there's no other questions, if you have questions and stuff, we do have a booth out there on the floor. We'd be glad to talk to you further on some of these details. We have a detailed booklet on the 3PO that goes into some example analysis and stuff too, if you're interested in seeing some of that. So, thank you very much. I guess I'll let you.